Hello. In this session, we are looking the procurement from risk transfer perspective. Well, contracts can be seen as risk management tools. And contract clauses are the buyer's tools for transferring the risk to the supplier. Also the responsibility for doing the project for the supplier. And also contracts are tools for division of risks between the parties, keeping risks with the buyer's organization to carry. And if supplier accepts the risks to be carried by them for certain premium agreed, so then the contract will be signed and the customer pays for the supplier's responsibility of doing the thing and carrying the risk. So risks are bought and sold, and the risks and the sales price are defined in the contract actually. In this picture, we illustrate the contractor or the role as a contractor as a risk buffer. At the top of this picture, we can see that the customer can absorb the cloud of risks itself if the customer wants to do the project, if the customer wants to carry all technical, environmental responsibilities and risks. So it is okay, customer can do it itself. Or alternatively, as the picture at the bottom shows, the customer or buyer can choose a contractor and make a contract with certain contract clauses and with agreed price with the contractor, so that the contractor will absorb the risk cloud. But actually, signing this contract means that there are different kinds of risks, kind of a contractual problems that will come to the customer to carry. So after signing the contract, risks might arise, for example, due to contractual risks, for contractual risks for the lack of contract clarity, inaccurate or defective contract clauses, and many other things. Also, signing the contract by the customer means that the customer loses kind of the freedom that it has to how to do the project and what kind of a project to do with what kind of end result. For example, if the customer decides to sign a fixed price contract with the contractor who is then committed to deliver something that is very tightly specified, so then the customer cannot do much but just to receive what is agreed to be delivered. So it's very difficult anymore for the customer to have the freedom to start adjusting the end product and kind of cancel what has been agreed. Also, one example of other types of risks that come to customer for to carry after signing the contract is, for example, the contractor's bankruptcy. So I have been personally witnessing a project where the contractor went bankrupt, and then the actual work in progress on the customer side was owned by the bankruptcy estate. And that was really a difficult situation because it was not for the customers just to take on and continue the work that is left by the contractor, because the contractor's work in progress work was owned by the bankruptcy estate, and in that way there were many juridical issues to be solved before the customer could buy that work in progress from its own side, from the bankruptcy estate, and continue completing it with another contractor. Well, factors that are important to consider when signing the contract. Now we have this risk transfer perspective. So is to consider which party can best control the events which may lead to the risk occurring. So is it the contractor or is it the customer? And if it's not the contractor, it might be that the contractor will charge quite high premium for it being forced to carry certain risk in contract clauses, for example. The party which can best control the risk if it occurs, whether it is preferable for the customer retain an involvement on the control of the risk at all or not. So it might be the customer's benefit or advantage to really have a control over certain risk and not give it to anyone else. So whether the party is able to sustain the consequences if the risk occurs, if the contractor, for example, finds it hard to carry certain responsibility and risk that the customer tries to give the contractor to carry in a contract, so again, the premium might be high, or that might not be a kind of a very beneficial situation. So the contract clauses should be defined and designed very carefully. So is the premium right? And whether if the risk is transferred leads to the possibility of a risk of a different nature. For example, this example of a contractor's bankruptcy is an example of a risk of a different nature that came by being contractually binded or bound to the contractor who goes bankrupt. Well, it is rather important really to consider the risk aspect when buying projects, because it is very natural that the customer and the contractor have different business goals and different objectives. So definitely incentive type of contracts where both parties win if performance is good are desirable, but it is very natural that for example, the planning horizon, for example, between the customer and contractor are rather different. The customer wants to look at the investment and the system life cycle over even decades, maybe 20 years of operations, and wants to optimize the project and project delivery on that time horizon. But for the contractor, actually the responsibilities and risks are defined in the contract. So maybe there is only half a year's guarantee period or something like that, and the contractor looks things from his own business perspective. It even can be that if the customer, when buying a project, has pushed the contractor very hard and kind of reduced the contract price in a forceful manner, it even can be that when the customer wants to minimize scope changes within the project, it even can be that the contractor has an interest to not to maximize but to increase many changes, because the contractor can then charge more of these changes occurring in the middle of the project. Then ultimately, if there are no problems and the customer finds things very fine in the sight of the customer's plant coming in time and no problems in there, so it might be even that the contractor moves its personnel to another site, another customer site where there are problems, and then again this particular customer site is on problems, even though the starting phase was that things go well. So these are just examples of different parties coming together, and the ultimate underlying business goals that the parties have, they are different, which is really natural. It cannot be that the customer's business is the contractor's business and vice versa. So, but there must be really careful procurement, doing carefully the procurement and designing the contract so that all parties would find it beneficial. Well, continuing the risk aspect and the risk perspective. So I will draw you a picture. Which picture is about relationship between the contract scope and contract scope definition and the contract type. So we have here contract type, and as we have learned, the ends of the continuum of certain contract types would be lump sum or fixed price contract, or then cost plus or cost reimbursable. And this cost reimbursable means, for example, that the customer is willing to pay for every hour that the contractor does work for the customer, for example, 50 euros an hour or 100 euros an hour, where there is the contractor's cost and certain plus fee included. There is certain margin which the customer doesn't know, but still it is a fixed hourly price, for example. So in practice, in a cost plus contract, the customer buys the contractor's resources and is more or less responsible for orchestrating and managing them in a beneficial manner for the customer's project. On the other hand, we have here scope definition, which is high or low or something in between. This scope definition means the completeness of the design of the end product. And we can move from low to high. And here we can move from cost plus to lump sum, and there are different contract types in between. For example, guaranteed maximum, which means that it is also the contractor's interest to limit its use of resources because there is a maximum price for the contract, or unit price. So it is agreed that, for example, every square meter wall painted, so the customer pays a fixed unit price, but the quantity of those units remains on customer's risk. Okay, how we read this picture? We need blue tack here, and we need big pen, actually 3 pens here connected. And if the scope definition is low, then it is very natural that it is beneficial for the customer to buy only the contractor's resources in a cost-plus contract type. But if the scope definition is high, then of course the customer can have the contractor to agree with a lump sum or fixed price contract, or have even a kind of a competitive bidding and choosing the contractor with the lowest bid price. Okay, but now the risk aspect, the story continues. We have here contractor's risk, and customer's risk. And it is rather natural that if the scope definition is high and the contractor has agreed to do a fixed price contract, a lump sum contract, so the customer's risk is rather low there. But on the other hand, if we look at the situation where the scope definition is low and the customer basically doesn't know what kind of a building he wants to have built, but he just buys contractor's resources as cost plus basis, just the man hours. So it is the fact is that the customer's risk is high, and also vice versa, the contractor's risk is here low. Just sell the man hours and charge from every man hour, and here in the lump sum side, the contractor's risk is naturally high. So the project's end product and how well it is defined, the contract type, and the kind of a risk carrying between the customer and the contractor are connected in this way. Now, this picture shows a hypothetical situation where there is a kind of a need to make a fixed price contract. So, what is the relation of that to time? And this picture shows that if there is a long distance from signing the contract to the actual delivery of whatever is agreed upon, so the contractor puts a higher price there because of the uncertainty that comes in a long time, and on a long time also that is connected to the fact that the scope, the actual completeness of the project end product is not designed that accurately. So there is an optimal time point of making a fixed price contract when the completeness of the design is rather good. But then if we spend too much time of making the design even more complete, and then the delivery time comes so short that the contractor starts feeling risk about the short delivery time, again the contractor might price that fixed price contract higher. So we are then again out of the optimal range if we do put the contractor in a kind of too much of a pressure of short delivery time while trying to make our design of the project more complete. Nice that you were with me discussing about contracts, risks, and procuring projects and these aspects of the supplier and the customer. That was all. See you again in another session.